Good morning, Year 10. I hope you're good. Welcome to today's lesson. Today we are going to move on to looking at the structure of Frankenstein. So today we'll look at structure, what it is, why it's significant, and then tomorrow I'm going to teach you how to embed your understanding of structure into your analysis. Before we get into the content, can you please pause the video and come back when you have copied down the title, the date, and the learning objective. Okay, if you're back, that means you're ready to complete the do now in full sentences. I'm getting quite frustrated with those of you who are being ultimately lazy and are not completing the do now in full sentences. I'm not sure how you think your books and your notes are going to be useful revision if your answers do not make sense. Can you pause the video and come back when you have these 5 completed in full sentences, please? Okay, so today, like I say, we are looking at structure, and there are 2 aspects of the structure in Frankenstein that we are going to touch upon. The first is something that we call a frame narrative, and the second is something that we call a narrative point of view, and we're going to explore those independently. So, first of all, frame narrative. This is the definition of a frame narrative, a story set within a story. Can you pause the video and return when you've copied that definition down, please? Okay, so we have this idea of a frame narrative. So there is a story within a story. So here is our frame, and that is one narrative. And then within that, we have the other narrative, the other story. What do you think, based on Frankenstein, what frames the text, and then what's in the middle of that frame? Have a think. Okay, hopefully you've established that the frame, the outside narrative, are the letters. The letters begin the story and they also conclude the story. And we hear from Wharton's perspective. And then that means that the story within that story is the story of Frankenstein himself, where Frankenstein shares why he has ended up on the boat with Wharton. That is the frame narrative of Frankenstein. So, why is it significant? Particularly, why do the letters help us understand what's going to happen in the story, and how do the letters at the end conclude what happened in the story? That's going to be most of our focus for our analysis of a frame narrative. So let's look at the opening letters. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at some key quotes, and then we're going to analyse what the opening letters foreshadow based on these quotes. Remember, foreshadowing is a hint at something that is going to happen in the future. So, we have this quote from letter 1. I shall satiate my ardent curiosity with the sight of a part of the world never before visited, and may tread a land never before imprinted by the foot of man. Let's pick this one apart a little bit. So we have this idea of kind of fulfilling a curiosity for Wharton by visiting a part of the world that has never been visited before, and kind of like leaving, like almost like imprinting his footprint on those lands, as if he would, gain praise for that process. So considering how this kind of mirrors the ambitions of Victor throughout the text, and what this foreshadows about his ambitions and his desires. From letter 2, we have, I desire the company of a man who could sympathise with me, whose eyes would reply to mine, You may deem me romantic, my dear sister, but I bitterly feel the want of a friend. So this quote particularly touches on kind of ideas about companionship and the desire to feel nurtured and to feel loved, and how that links to not only Victor but also the creation's experiences in the main body of the narrative. We also have this quote from letter 3. No incidents have hitherto, so until now, befallen us that would make a figure in a letter. 1 or 2 stiff gales and the springing of a leak are accidents which experienced navigators scarcely remember to record, and I shall be well content if nothing worse happened to us during our voyage. So I often kind of look at this quote and I think that Wharton is almost ignoring the kind of warning signs here of things starting to go bad, and almost this kind of excessive confidence that nothing is going to go wrong. And then we have this final quote from letter 4, which is one of my personal favourites, and this is where Victor is now on board, and he says, unhappy man, do you share my madness? Have you drunk also of the intoxicating draught? Hear me, let me reveal my tale, and you will dash the cup from your lips. So we're going to look at this in a little bit more detail in a minute, the ideas of madness, the ideas of intoxication and dashing the cup from his lips. We're not going to talk about this in detail right now because I am going to show you how I would like you to complete the task. You're going to choose 2 quotes to analyse what the opening letters foreshadow, either letter 1, letter 2, or letter 3, and I am going to analyse letter 4 for you. You're more than welcome to copy down what I'm about to analyse, or you can just watch and do your own in a second. Nevertheless, you still need to do 2 quotes on your own. This is how I would like you to analyse these quotes. So, in letter, whatever the letter is, you explain what's happened, and then you embed your quote. And then you explain what this foreshadows. So I'm just going to come out of this, and I'm going to use this sentence structure here to analyse letter 4. So I'm going to write in letter 4, and I'm going to explain what happens. Victor is on board with Wharton, and is eager to share how he has ended up in this predicament. When he asks if Wharton has drunk the intoxicating draught. And remember, we don't want to write that whole quote out. We want to just embed kind of those short bursts of quotations. If Wharton has drunk the intoxicating draught and expresses how he will dash the cup from your lips. And I'm going to embed a tone word here as well. When he frantically asks. Okay, and what does this foreshadow? So here is where I'm going to unpick my quote a little bit, and you're going to do the same process in a second for 2 other quotes. So the idea of kind of dashing the cup from his lips means that once Wharton understands what has happened to Victor, he will not want to drink this intoxicating draught anymore. And this is almost kind of a metaphor for maybe the feeling of having like power by doing things that no one else has done before, and like the glory that is associated with that, or even kind of being linked to the fact that Frankenstein sees that Wharton's ambitions is going to hurt him in the same way that Frankenstein's ambitions hurt him. So I'm going to say this foreshadows the failure or maybe the dangers associated with ambition. This will shadow the dangers associated with ambition, as Victor is aware that Wharton's ambitions will harm him like his did. And I'm going to introduce you to the idea here of a cautionary tale. Victor's story acts as a cautionary tale. A cautionary tale is a story with a moral message. So you could say that a fable is a cautionary tale. It always has a moral message. Victor's story acts as a cautionary tale against seeking glory and power. Okay, let me just make it full screen again. So I have analysed what this quote foreshadows, and it's a piece of analysis that would be very beneficial if you were to get a quote on, get an essay question on Victor, and you can touch on this to kind of frame your ideas about how the text is a moral message against kind of ambition and pursuing kind of the unknown. So what you're going to do now is you're going to mimic the same process to complete this analysis for two other quotes. You're not going to do letter 4 because I have done that one. If you would like to copy that down, you can, but you still need to choose 2 quotes from letter 1, 2, or 3 and follow this same process here. Remember, you need to explain what's happened, embed a quote, and then talk about what has been foreshadowed, most importantly. Pause the video and come back when you have 2 pieces of analysis like this in your books, please. Okay, so we've looked at the opening letters. Now, what about the significance of the final letters? So let's have a look at this extract from a letter in Wharton in continuation after chapter 24. And we're going to focus on how does Victor's hamartia act as a warning to Wharton. Remember hamartia or hamartia. I've recently found out there's multiple pronunciations of this word. How does his fatal flaw that leads to his downfall act as a warning to Wharton? So, as he's dying, he says, "Farewell, Wharton, seek happiness in tranquillity and avoid ambition, even if it be the only apparently innocent one of distinguishing yourself in science and discoveries. Yet why do I say this? I have myself been blasted in these hopes, yet another may succeed." So let's just have a look at the ideas. He says, seek happiness in tranquility, be peaceful, and avoid ambition. That's ultimately the kind of the main moral message of the text, and it almost summarises the problems with dangerous knowledge. Let's continue reading. Wharton writes, his voice became fainter as he spoke, and at length, exhausted by his effort, he sank into silence. About half an hour afterwards, he attempted again to speak, but was unable. He pressed my hand feebly, and his eyes closed forever, while the irradiation of a gentle smile passed away from his lips. So it's quite interesting here that at the beginning he talks about the importance of being happy and peaceful with what you have and avoiding ambition. And then we see the impact of that firsthand through Wharton's eyes. So his voice becomes fainter, he's exhausted, he sank into silence, he's unable to speak, he's feeble, his eyes closed forever, and a gentle smile passed away from his lips. So we have the moral message about dangerous knowledge, and then the impact of that firsthand through Wharton's eyes. Wharton continues writing, Margaret, what comments can I make on this untimely extinction of this glorious spirit? What can I say that will enable you to understand the depth of my sorrow? All that I should express would be inadequate and feeble. My tears flow, my mind is overshadowed by a cloud of disappointment, but I journey towards England, and I may there find consolation. So particularly this last line here is Wharton almost taking in what Victor has said as a result of his death and establishing that he no longer wants to pursue this, as sad as it makes him. He knows that he needs to go home and feel peace. So having a look at this extract, I would like you to answer this question based on the final letters. How does Victor's hamartia act as a warning to Wharton? So you want to start off by writing Victor's hamartia acts as a warning to Wharton because. And as you can see in the red here, I want you to write 5 sentences. And I made quite a few points here that could form those 5 sentences. So if you want to rewind and listen to me talk about this extract and then complete this sentence starter, that is fine. But pause the video now and only come back when you've written 5 sentences to answer this question, please. Okay, so we've looked at the opening letters and we've looked at the final letters, but what are their significance overall? So I would like you to write an answer to the question based on what we understand about the opening and the closing letters, thinking specifically about what is the purpose of the frame narrative, why has it been included? You might want to consider some of these bullet points, the questions that the opening letters leave us with, the answers that the final letters provide us with, the way in which Victor arguably redeems himself and takes responsibility through his warning to Wharton, and also the way in which Victor and Wharton mirror one another. Again, the idea of mirroring here is that they are parallels of each other. They are very, very similar. Consider what hearing Wharton's story allows us to learn, and then hearing Victor's story allows us to learn. There's arguably no right or wrong answer here. It's more an exploration, but you need to be writing 7 sentences. I'm not going to accept submissions for this question that are too brief. Pause the video and come back when you have completed this question. Okay, so we've looked at the frame narrative in quite a lot of detail, and now we're going to look at the second feature of the structure in Frankenstein, which is narrative point of view. Narrative point of view is ultimately whose eyes we see the events of the story through. So we're going to analyse each of those narrative points of views today. So we have this table here that tells us the narrative points of view in order. So initially we see Captain Wharton's point of view through the letters, then that shifts to Victor, who tells Wharton about his life and ultimately how he came to be wandering in the Arctic. Then we switch to the creation, who narrates his experiences in first person being I, me, we, us. Victor then takes over and continues his story and his own experiences. That is particularly important when he creates the female companion again and then destroys it. He experiences the death of Elizabeth, so on and so forth. And then at the end, we have Wharton, who continues writing to his sister as the novel has gone full circle. So we touched on this one and this one in our analysis of the frame narrative, but particularly now we want to focus on these 3. And we're going to complete this table to analyse the significance of that narrative point of view. I'll explain what that means in a second. But for now, can you pause the video and copy this table exactly as it appears on your screen into your exercise books? I recommend that you use half a page or more for this task. Okay, if you're back, that means that you have got this table down. So what do I mean by the significance of a narrative point of view? These are some of the questions that you would want to ask yourself. How does each narrative impact our feelings towards the characters? What does the point of view reveal about the character? And does the point of view show any similarities or differences between the characters? So I'm going to show you what I expect in this table, and I'm going to look at the creation. I'm going to start you off with the creation. So I'm just going to end so I can type. All right. So the creation narrates his experiences in first person. We're just going to write a few bullet points to help us to analyse the significance. So I'm going to look at this first question here. How does each narrative impact our feelings towards the character? This is sympathy. Sympathy is developed as we hear of the creation's neglect, sorrow, and torment. Next question, what does the point of view reveal about the character? Reveals his confusion at prejudice and his desire for a companion, as well as his vow of revenge. I think I'm going to add, actually, sympathy is developed as we hear of the creation's neglect, sorrow, and torment without Victor's bias, without his kind of, opinion on everything. And you know how I feel about Victor anyway. And then we have, does the point of view show any similarities or differences between characters? I think ultimately we see that the creation and Victor are both isolated in their own kind of unique ways. Establishes Victor and the creation's similar isolation, and that's quite sad, really, isn't it? Because ultimately, if Victor had not neglected the creation, both of them might arguably feel less pain as they go through the text. It establishes Victor and the creation's similar isolation and their motives for revenge, I would say, as we learn a little bit about why both of them want to kind of exact their own revenge on the other. So you are more than welcome to copy this down if you would like to, or build on it if you think I've missed anything. Ultimately, the more independent you are in this task, the better it will be for your knowledge. But I want you to mimic the same process by going through each of these questions for the other narrative point of views. Captain Morton, Victor at the beginning, Victor at the end. Particularly, this narrative here from Victor should be quite different to this narrative here, because at this point we don't know anything about the creation. At this point we do. So do our opinions of Victor change after we've heard the creation's point of view? And then finally, Wharton at the end. Pause the video and return when this table is complete, please. Okay, if you're back, that means you're ready to submit your work. Just a gentle reminder about how I expect you to submit it. If you need to pause on the screen now to mimic the subject that I want you to include in your email, please do so. But send me your work and I will speak to you in tomorrow's video lesson.